Today's video is a bit of a different one. We're in Leeds city centre following a weird medieval path pointed out to us by a medieval knight through the modern city centre, and we'll end up at one of my favourite Victorian buildings in the whole country, let alone the city of Leeds. So I hope you enjoy this really short walk. If you want to do it yourself, you can do it in 10 minutes, but you'll be missing out on some excellent history and architecture. In 1893, Leeds was awarded city status and City Square was laid out in celebration. The idea for the square is credited to industrialist and then Lord Mayor Thomas Harding and designed by architect William Bakewell, later altered in the 1960s and then again in 2002 to create a more pleasant open space shielded from road traffic. It provides the first impression as you exit the north concourse of Leeds railway station, which was added in 1937. City Square has recently been transformed to remove through traffic from Wellington Street, Park Row and Boar Lane, making it a people-first environment. That's at least the bare bones of what's changed so far. This has been a rapid post-pandemic change, and though it remains fairly featureless, it is arguably an improvement. The square is bounded by some excellent examples of late Victorian and early 20th century architecture. The General Post Office building dates from 1896 and is built in what has been described as a Northern Renaissance style. To the south is the Queen's Hotel of 1937. 10 stories of Portland stone in the classical style, this straight-edge Goliath of precise proportions is far from dull. I stand transfixed before its wide facade overlooking the square, in awe of its presence. There is something unnerving about architecture this dominant. The sprawl of the largely pedestrianised square is an eerie setting from which to study this awesome gateway in and out of the city. Statues of Leeds worthies were introduced not long after the square was laid out, and many of these have been moved as well, the most prominent statue being Edward the Black Prince, who points us in the direction of our journey today through the medieval town. Thomas Brock's life-size statue of Edward the Black Prince was erected in City Square in 1903 and was listed Grade 2 star in 1963. Now, the Black Prince is not a historical figure with any obvious connection to the town of Leeds. Lord Mayor at the time, Thomas Harding, explained that a nationally prominent figure was desired over a local figure for the main feature of City Square. The statue bears the inscription, "The flower of England's chivalry, the upholder of the rights of the people." There is purported to have been a panel of vague description in commemoration of the Black Prince's father in the old cloth hall in Leeds, now lost, as his father was understood to have brought, not single-handedly, the textile trade to the West Riding. But most plausible is that the completion of the square coincided with the year of Edward VII's coronation and the end of the Boer War. This statue is therefore perhaps a tribute to Edward, who, as Prince of Wales, also opened LGI, Leeds General Infirmary, in 1867. Speculation over the Black Prince's presence in Leeds is still discussed today, but the story of this statue is quite an extraordinary one, as it came from Europe by boat and to Leeds by canal, and here it remains. If we follow the direction in which the Black Prince points, we head east down Boar Lane and almost immediately come to the boundary of the old medieval town. In September 1989, a plaque was erected at the west end of Boar Lane to commemorate the West Bar, which was one of 6 town bars in Leeds. But Leeds is not a heavily defended settlement like York, and so did not have large stone fortified entrances. These were more likely wooden gates designed to keep out stray cattle, delay unwanted visitors, and serve as barriers at which tolls could be collected on market days. It takes a great deal of imagination to picture the layout of medieval Leeds, especially as we head eastward down Boar Lane, but as we move on, the layout of the old town will become clearer. Local businessman and alderman John Barron, who pioneered the mass production of ready-made clothes in Leeds, owned a shop on Bridgate in 1851 and expanded his business due to adopting new technologies at the time. By 1870 he was Mayor of Leeds and promoted the development of Boar Lane simultaneously with the new railway station nearby. Barron owned a shop at number 1 Boar Lane when the street was being redeveloped. A large number of the commercial buildings were built by his favoured architect, Thomas Ambler. Ambler employed different styles for his buildings, which gives the street a very varied look. The south side of Boar Lane was threatened with demolition in the 1970s, but thankfully these plans were never realised in full. Number 3, the Bourse, a former bank building, probably by Thomas Ambler, of 1869 to 72, is a particularly eye-catching building on Boar Lane. Much of the ground level ornament is carved with birds and animals, including the owl badge of Leeds. Granite columns and deeply carved capitals support an arcade with classical detailing across both facades. Some of the vine and scroll work is reminiscent of the art of the insular world. In particular, I'm minded of some of the pre-conquest standing stone crosses and related archaeology, such as those with local precedent on display at Ilkley Parish Church, for example, which date to the 8th and 9th centuries. Heading east along Boar Lane, we reach Bridgate, which runs on a north-south axis interrupting Boar Lane as we cut across. This is the heart of the old town, where medieval Leeds grew up on the north bank of the River Aire. Bridgate means Bridgate. It's a wide street running up from the river, and it remains one of the city's main areas for hospitality and retail, sort of, though its character is notably different in parts of its course. Bridgate and the old town of Leeds deserves a whole video in itself, but as we walk across Bridgate today towards the Corn Exchange, there is a copy of John Cossin's map of Leeds to look at. This is probably the most reproduced of the city's historical maps, and it dates to circa 1726. It shows Boar Lane reaching Bridgate, but not the more modern Duncan Street, which would be laid out later, and that's what will take me to the Corn Exchange today. Now we arrive at Cuthbert Brodrick's Corn Exchange on Coal Lane, built between 1860 and 1862. Described by Nicholas Pevsner as remarkably independent and functional, and in a later version of the Pevsner Architectural Guide for Leeds as a building of national, maybe international significance. Brodrick had great success with Leeds Town Hall on Hedgerow in the previous decade and had come to set a standard for extravagant civic architecture which kept Leeds at pace with the other great northern provincial towns and cities in terms of displaying its new wealth. Brodrick also designed the Leeds Institute building on Cookridge Street several years after his work on the Corn Exchange, and the two projects overlapped for a period, keeping the architect very busy. It was also a time when he was working towards the Grand Hotel in Scarborough, which opened in 1867, and at the time that was the largest hotel in Europe. In my opinion though, Brodrick exceeded expectations with the Corn Exchange, delivering a fine building for the corn merchants nearby the established market and cloth hall in Leeds. Its conversion into a shopping centre in 1989 and 1990 for modern shops was well received, and it remains a very cherished space today. It is one of my favourite buildings in Leeds, and in fact perhaps one of my favourite examples of mid-Victorian architecture in the country. The exterior has diamond-pointed rusticated sandstone ashlar. It isn't overly ornamental. There is no architectural foppery. It is functional, bold and coarse. The local cross-bedded sandstone with quartz pebbles sparkling in the light is above all else, in my opinion, a great triumph. Because of the stone's great geological properties, the fact that it has weathered grey over time doesn't detract from the appearance at all. There are many back lanes, yards, alleys and streets through the site of the old town of Leeds, down by the River Aire and stretching north towards the Hedgerow. Signs of Leeds as a centre of trade and commerce in the 17th and 18th centuries are few and far between as the coming clouds of industry transformed the city and expanded up and around the river. Though resonances of the old town remain from a time when much of Leeds was nothing more than fields, development eventually came in force. The built environment in the perambulations of the city centre continues to evolve at an alarming rate, showing no signs of slowing down. Change is not all bad by any means, and Leeds will not lose its heritage completely. This makes it all the more fascinating to explore the urban environment today, as there is so much to see and learn from our urban surroundings. Wherever you go in England, to any town or city where the expansion of business and transport has been influential in planning decisions, it is always important that we come together to acknowledge and protect the remaining heritage. Leeds is no different than anywhere else. It has lost a lot already, but there is much more to see here and much more survives, and I encourage you to come and explore for yourself. Thank you for watching this video. Hope to see you soon.